It's Katie Rose, straight up with a twist. All right, what's up, humans? This is Katie Rose, straight up with a twist, here to share their personal truths and stories on the subject today. So today we're going to be discussing Mormonism. It is disgusting, but we're going to be discussing foreshadow.
Yeah.
So today I have with me Camille Vela.
Hi. Thank you so much for having me.
And we have Jillyn Walker.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Basically on the topic, I don't know a lot about it, and that's why I'm here with you. I want you guys to sit here and educate me and teach me about the things that I don't know. But some facts that some people do know are that Mormons only make up about 1.7% of the U.S. population. So that's almost the same as the Jewish population in the U.S. Now, Christianity by far is the highest worldly. And then in second place is Islam. So those take the top two spots. And crazy enough, Islam is considered the fastest growing religion in the world. And you know why?
I don't.
Ooh.
Because of fertility. Of course, something I'm struggling with, right? So Islamic women have more babies, which, of course, I wish I had that problem. So what I understand is that the story of Mormonism started in upstate New York. So God spoke to some guy named Joseph Smith, and then Smith claimed an angel led him to a nearby hill where he dug up a pair of golden plates, and then he translated the Book of Mormon. So moving forward, he, collected all of these people, and he was then murdered, and the old Mormon settlement that was in Illinois was then abandoned, and they decided to migrate west to Utah. So that was about the 1840s. And back then, the Utah territory was a Mexican territory, along with California. And then that became the 45th state in 1896. But it only became the 45th state in 1896 after the people finally decided to renounce polygamy, which I thought was very interesting. Mormons believe that when Jesus returns to earth, he will first go to Jerusalem and then to Missouri. You, Camille, are from Mississippi, correct?
Yep.
And how do you say the city that you're from?
Senatobia. It's a native name.
And Jillyn, you're from the Pacific Northwest, but what part?
My family moved a lot. It's very Mormon. But I lived a good deal of it in the Seattle area.
Oh, I visited Seattle. It is beautiful there.
Mm-hmm.
The flowers are gorgeous.
Mm-hmm.
And it was called the Church of Christ, and now is the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, which is a really big mouthful. And from what I hear, most of the temples are run by men, and this is the world that we're living in. So my first question to both of you is, do you feel, and you're going to set the tone here with how you left the religion, but do you feel that having technology and researching articles like in the palm of your hands on Mormonism and its counterpart religions, do you think that helped you open your eyes to be where you are now?
Yeah, go ahead, Jillyn.
It helped, but honestly, it was the words of the church leaders that were what directed my path out, and then deconstruction afterwards was useful to have facts and history available.
Okay, so let's start with you, Jillyn. First, let's start how you got your wonderful name, so unique, and how your life was growing up.
Mormons have a lot of kids, and not my family wasn't very big. So my mom, I also had fertility issues, but they get creative on names. So mine liked the names Jill and Lynn and put them together, but it's meant my whole life knowing how to say them.
Do you also have a middle name?
Heather.
Heather. Okay, there you go.
Oh, out in Utah, they get really experimental in Mormon culture to use crazy letters as well. Mm-hmm. Like if she had been out in Utah, woof.
Maybe my parents are from Utah. It could have been worse.
There you go.
I'm lucky. I get it.
Sorry.
My parents were, I once wondered, what is it about so much abuse in Mormonism? Like in Educated, the best-selling novel, and like she tries to say it's not indicative of all of Mormonism, but there's a lot of abuse in Mormonism. hence the news going around right now with it getting some attention. But there's a lot of dysfunction and brokenness that we just pretend isn't there. And my family was very broken. I actually don't talk to my extended family at all.
Wow. Do you feel like that's something that can be mended over in time?
No. There's a point when you realize in some relationships that it's just not healthy anymore for you or your children to be around that, or my spouse. Actually, they were pretty bad to him too, and so it's just for the best that we did not.
Well, it sounds like through it all, you somehow managed to stay level-headed, and through something that seems so cult-like and manipulative, it's amazing that you came out for the better.
I feel very lucky about that.
So tell me about your childhood growing up.
One of the things I think of the most, and it's fun to be wearing this, was modesty was a very big deal. Like to the point of me teaching my dolls about modesty, and my mom sitting me in front of a mirror so that I could see, am I sitting modestly at church in a dress. It was so incredibly important to her. There was one day I wore a t-shirt that was kind of form-fitting, and she said I looked like a streetwalker just because the t-shirt was form-fitting.
And you had to wear all the undergarments, correct? There are specific undergarments?
Not until I was an adult. But modesty was still just really important.
So we graduate to those undergarments.
Yeah, the modesty when you're a kid is grooming you to wear them when you're older.
But like I didn't wear a tank top from like the time I was a small girl until like 3 until last fall.
Wow.
And I turned 40 this fall. So like that long. So this is like a very big deal for me.
Bravo.
Yeah, talk about like letting, and especially in Florida, girl, we got all the kinds of strapless things. Camille, what was that like for you, the clothing?
It was similar, very rigorous. And first and foremost, before I even start my spiels, like, thank you so much, Katie Rose, for having me. Because like I can speak for me, but I can assume maybe for Jillyn as well. This is extremely cathartic, being able to dust off all of these things, and it's a really healthy cathartic thing, so thank you.
Absolutely. That's why I started this podcast. It's a platform, and if I can get as many women, I'm obviously for women, especially in just in so many aspects, and just speaking our voices. So thank you guys for coming on here and sharing your struggles. It's not easy.
Absolutely. So similarly, I grew up in a family of 6 kids, 4 girls. And the girls, I can say, had it way more intensely, and at least in my family unit, about modesty. Very similarly, our shorts always had to be down to our knee. We would even have to do a bending over test to make sure that when we bend over forward, that when it rides up, it doesn't go too, like it can't go past that quarter of a thigh type area.
Also, your shirt, like if a shirt was a scoop neck.
It's like high school rules, like when you get kicked out of class, but like in every single day.
It's like your strictest form of even private school. So the private school is that you must have a cap, like your sleeve can't be capped. So like, even as a kid, my mom wasn't too keen on cap sleeves. Cap means that it covers your shoulder, but it hugs your armpit. So there's not an underarm sleeve. Mm-hmm. So that was scooting the line, if you will. It needed to have a full sleeve, and then your midsection was to basically never show. You were in a one-piece suit. Your shirts, your dresses, and back in my day,
now you moonlight as Marilyn Monroe. So what in the world? I mean, we just went completely the other direction.
I know. It just leaped across the moon there. But for me, I mean, like, that's just the system of it, but the mental and emotional of that, growing up around kids who could wear 2 pieces, young girls who were wearing bikinis and the tankinis. It was really like for me, the swimsuit thing was slightly devastating, because I had to wear basically grandma 1 pieces. That was all that was available in our budget. In a family of 6, I would have to go to the Walmart section and basically go to where the grandmas would find their one pieces that covered everything, and then pick the one that I could kind of let my self-esteem build into,
Were you allowed to date? Probably not.
Jillyn, you want to go first? That's a fun one.
I think there's a lot of variety in each family. There's this weird mix of every Mormon is supposed to be a missionary, so we're supposed to be reaching out to people, we're supposed to be sharing who we are and sharing the truth, I say in quotes. But at the same time, there's this terror that you'll be friends with somebody who will influence you away from the church. So there's this sort of push-pull of like, you're supposed to be being like this model Mormon citizen, particularly as a young person, and not be friends with people who might poorly influence you. So I would say the majority of my friends were members of the church. And also I was homeschooled, which is not something all Mormons do, but just like that was my life. Mm-hmm. And there's definitely, like, you cultivate your friendships differently. And as I got a job, like as a teenager, working at a museum, and I definitely got exposed to a lot more, because there was like basically a lot of entertainers and actors. So I definitely got exposed to a bigger variety of people there. But they weren't able to influence me as much as Mormonism.
Now, did you ever break the rules? Like, did you have like a first kiss with a boy and hid it from your parents or anything like that?
Oh yeah. So I broke so many different rules. I had a very active sexuality when I was very young.
Good for you.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I mean, I think to this day, I'm still recovering from who I am as my nature of who I am, and it being so severely repressed as a kid, and not just repressed.
Yes.
Yeah, you want to rebel.
It was met with insane amounts of guilt, shame, gaslighting, you name it, for mental abuse, from the standards. My God, the standards of the church.
They have a little pamphlet called "For the Strength of Youth."
For the Strength of Youth.
Every little tiny detail about your life, like what you drink, what you eat, where you go, who you spend time with, what you watch, what you listen to, what you read.
Yeah.
Everything.
And these are not recommendations.
People debate how strongly you have to follow them, but if your parents are hardline, they're like rules.
This is your life rule book.
Wow.
And it seems like Jillyn and I have very similar circumstances, that it was installed as our life rule book. So me as a kid, at 5 years old or whatever, kindergarten, first grade, whatever I was, I like set it up. I had my first kiss under the playground equipment, wrote my little cute note. And this is not to cast shade on my parental unit, but somebody snitched on us and the teacher found out. And then this was a private school. My one time in life, I went to a private school, and she basically, this is casting shade on her and that whole school outlook, but
go for it.
Called us out in front of class, had us put our heads down on our desk. It was like a public humiliation thing. Then she called my mother, and that became a really big religious volcanic eruption. It was like a hardcore threatening to, like, physical abuse, this, that, and the other. It was really awful.
What is your relationship like with your parents?
So my dad is a country bumpkin. My mom is this tropical goddess of a person. My mother converted my dad in their second round of marriage. And my dad's basically a provider. That's it. And after a kid, when the 6 kids turned 18, that's basically his off switch for parenting at all. So I don't really have a relationship with my dad at all. There's like a distant "I love you," high five type scenario. That's it. My mom is extremely active in my life.
And she is still practicing Mormonism?
So my dad dropped off the Mormon radar years ago, when he got remarried. So my parents have been divorced for several years, at least 10. And now he's First Baptist. So in Senatobia, Mississippi, First Baptist and Mormons is oil and water. Yep. Oil and water. So it's ironic that he went from Mormon to First Baptist. Then my mom is extremely active, like diehard, super hardcore still, but I have to give her major growth props because she went from kind of a psychotic, abusive person in my upbringing to now she has done a lot of therapeutic
Soul searching,
education, soul searching. She's learned about what boundaries are, that they exist, and how to use them. Through 5 out of the 6 of her kids leaving Mormonism, one of which being like this diehard, super pious one, even left. It just opened her eyes to a new level of just kind of a sacred benevolence of like, okay, I need to let my kids be my kids. They need to be their own person. Otherwise, they're going to boundary me out of their life. Like
yeah,
they've made
at
that
some
clear.
point, what's more important, having a
So,
relationship with your kids, or sticking to
yeah,
this,
just keep your thing in your box and don't it's kind of like if Jillyn's extended family were to do that, she'd have them in her life because they would be willing to have a personal boundary. My religion's mine and it stays here with me, and I don't need to force anything or passive aggressively do anything or attack direct, you know what I mean? So my mom went through a lot of accidents. She forfeited boundaries or she passively did that. She taught my son how to pray.
Mm.
And it was, I don't think it was a deliberate thing behind my back, but I will tell you, I mean, Jillyn could probably
You're like, I'm raising my child. This
share.
is my child.
Yeah. So it was, and it was like I had an explode, like somebody stabbed me in the chest because it was such a like trigger for PTSD of like, no, no, none of that. And it was like Jillyn, it was the primary freaking prayer from start to finish because they brainwash the kids to pray in a certain way, and we can talk about that later.
Boundaries are terrible in Mormonism. They don't
Yeah, they
really
don't
believe in
exist.
boundaries.
They don't exist.
And I heard, it's funny, I heard somebody who had left the evangelical faith, and they were saying that part of the problem is that when you say that like this is your church family, it doesn't make it so that you get to have like people who are closer to you or people that are further out. There's just no boundaries. You don't get to decide who's closer, who's not. And in Mormonism, they speak similarly to your congregation. It's supposed to be like your family, but if you move, they act like they don't know who you are. It's awkward. Boundaries are just not a thing. And that was definitely something that was an issue for my mom, but I think it's just an issue for Mormonism in general. They're really, really bad at boundaries.
I mean, I just thought that was an issue for mother-in-laws and mothers in general, but I mean, definitely.
It's a special kind of bad, special kind of bad. And also, they do a lot of terrorizing. They terrorize parents too. So, Camille, how much of your child's life were you part of connected to Mormonism? Because my kids,
None.
we left last year. Okay, so we left just last summer, and so my kids got all the indoctrination, one of them up to like 14 and a half, and
oh geez,
right, and there's just a lot of terrorizing that they do to parents that like, well, if you don't do a good enough job at teaching them, you're not going to get to be a forever family.
When you say they, who are you referring to when you say they?
Leadership and doctrine. Like it's in the doctrine.
Twice a year, they have a meeting where the male leaders and a few women leaders, there's only a few, will give talks about how everything should be done. It's kind of like TED Talks, but more traumatic. They'll have advice on absolutely everything, but there's
the best way I've ever heard it put.
I'm glad you can have a sense of humor about this. How hard was it to leave the religion?
I was a Mormon missionary, so those stories can go on for miles. But for leaving, I did mine all under the radar. Jillyn, I think you were very, very upfront publicly about your leaving. I was scared about all of that because I had become, in my intimate little corner of Mormonism, kind of a pillar with my family, community, whatever. So I was very intimidated about all of a sudden, I would talk the talk and I was walking that walk piously. And now all of a sudden, literally within a year, I decided this is not for me. I would say the only time that I had a heartbreaking moment was when I converted both of my best friends. And both of them had negative responses to me, one of which was really impactful in a horrible way because her first response to me. And mind you, this was after my pious marriage ended due to my late husband passing away. Um, and so I'd gone on the soul searching thing, concluded it wasn't for me, came to my best friend and I said this as much. And her response was, did your covenants in the temple not mean anything to you?
So wait, you
And
converted them to Mormonism?
mhm,
Oh my gosh. And then they stayed and you left?
yeah, both
Oh
of them are
dear.
extremely pious. Like I created monsters.
Oh
It
no.
and so much that me leaving, the other best friend, her response was, well, I guess it's my time to be your missionary now. And I was like, oh,
Please no.
Look what you
what
did.
have I done? What have I done? I created Frankenstein monsters. That's kind of what you can expect though. You expect the shaming and the guilt, or you can expect the righteous savior mindset of like, that's fine. You're lost from the flock and we're gonna shepherd you back at some point in some way.
I was trying to think of the order of operations. I gave a talk because people are assigned to give from the congregation. People are assigned to take turns giving like the sermon, and mine, I took the opportunity to speak up about Black Lives Matter, and there's some scripture about lifting up the heavy hands that hang down. I don't remember which book of scripture it's in now, but the idea is lifting up people. And so I was talking about Black Lives Matter. I talked about LGBTQ, people who need us to look out for them, people who need to speak up for them. And I remember after I sat down, I had this like ice cold feeling and I felt like I need to get out of here. And I didn't know what that meant. And then 2 weeks later, I was brought into the bishop's office and apparently people had yelled at him. Bishop is the person in charge of the congregation, lay
Mm-hmm.
clergy, not professional. He has like an IT job, I think, in regular life, but he's the leader because they asked him to be and he said yes. And he was basically saying like I couldn't ever say LGBTQ at church or Black Lives Matter. That was the same as saying MAGA. It was too upsetting, and that people had yelled at him over me saying any of these things. And uh, I remember fantasizing about leaving, but I mean I think that shows some of the hostility. Like there's definitely a lot of get everybody to be the same, get everybody
Mm-hmm.
to agree, or be quiet, or even go away.
Now, how do holidays work? Do you celebrate them, birthdays, anniversaries? And you said you didn't have a sip of alcohol until what? You were 39?
Yeah, just in the last year that I tried it, but and I think I was out for like 6 months before I even tried alcohol. Christmas is definitely different because I think my oldest still feels kind of Christian, but the rest, like the rest of us, are more like agnostic atheists. So Christmas was weird last year to go from being
Yeah.
feeling very Christian. Mormons believe they're very Christian. It's super different from other levels of Christian, other versions of Christianity, but they believe they're very Christian. So it was definitely a huge shift.
So not
No,
like
no, we're
Jehovah's Witness, nothing like
no,
that.
no, they're big
Okay.
on holidays.
Now there is something that almost sounds sweet, but Mormons say that they believe that your souls were split in two, giving each of us a soulmate to find on earth. And that if you do everything the right way, you'll eventually be joined together again as one soul and given a planet to rule over as a god.
Oh,
I don't know where that
can
one.
I?
No,
Okay,
go.
I don't know where that first part went. That first part's completely fictional. There's no split in two scenarios that is in the doctrine. And forgive me if I'm
Yeah,
wrong,
agreed.
but
No, I agree.
according to my understanding, that's nothing. But there is the ultimate goal is that you get to have your eternal partner that must be your opposite sex. That marriage
No
that is done
progression
in
here, just polygamy.
oh girl, that was my catalyst. We're gonna put a pin in that. But yeah, that marital couple who got sealed, aka married, inside of the Mormon temple exclusively, and they've lived the rest of their days of their mortality on earth righteously, keeping all of the rules, aka commandments. When they die, second coming happens with Christ. Christ pulls all of the righteous back
Hmm.
to wherever the heck they go. And then, yeah, they all get to create their own planets and populate them with
Have
their
kids
offspring,
forever.
with their husband, but all of their sister wives.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my goodness. Wow. So since I brought up polygamy, it sounded like you had a little reaction there to that. So would you like to?
Yeah, that was my catalyst. So Jillyn was her babies, and then I didn't even have a baby at the time.
Hmm.
Um, But so whenever my late husband passed, that's when I was like, okay, I'm just going to be super pious and I'm going to be romantic and never marry again. But the bishop, the congregational leader, basically sat me down in his office and was like, so we should put you in the singles congregation. And I was like,
Oh,
but I've been a widow for like 4 months.
oh my goodness.
And mind you, I'm still pregnant.
Heartless.
So I was like, what? And then he started vomiting scriptures about, marriage and having a companion and why a man in the family unit is so important. I digress. I started
Yeah,
asking
tell me more
questions.
about that, though. Tell me more about the history in the church and polygamy.
It's the Abrahamic covenant that started in the Bible when Abraham was permitted from God to basically grow the
Joseph
kingdom
had the
of God.
hots. Also, Joseph Smith had the hots for his foster daughter.
Fast forward to Joseph.
Yeah. He said that God told him that he was supposed to restore that he was supposed to bring back celestial marriage, which was having more than one wife. But the thing I didn't understand until last summer is that this one person who had researched it further, the first person he chose was a young woman, like my teen daughter's age, who was basically his foster child, worked in their home, like alongside his wife Emma. They were close, so close, and he decided that was who he was supposed to be with. And then there's actually a lot of stories of him manipulating and trying to convince other young men that they should be with him, or convincing their dads they should be with him, or one family, it was for the eternal blessings of the family, that she felt like a personal sacrifice.
Yeah,
and
it gets really icky.
Than my teen. And inside the church, you just don't hear those stories, or you don't believe them.
No.
Those ones are just mean and hateful. But if you go look it up, it's real.
Yeah, and the interpretations of the Bible, even in Christianity or Catholicism, when they say you cannot lay down to bed, it can be interpreted differently. And a lot of times people say they interpreted it as being the same sex, when really what they were trying to do was avoid older men laying down with younger people, boys. And as you can see, even in the Catholic Church, we've had issues with this. So
just to turn, like, to come to head on the catalyst with me, because that was amazing details, Jillyn. Yeah. So I was sitting in a really hard space mentally, because I'm a one man minded. At the time, I was very much a monogamous minded person when it came to romance.
Mormonism.
Oh yeah,
women, and so at least it's super important in Mormonism that you be all about that one man.
Yeah. So I'm sitting there going, but I'm still in love with my late husband, right? Meanwhile, the doctrine is being forced down my throat saying I needed to remarry. So I was like, oh, okay. Me being the pious believer I was like, okay, well, then a previous affair, romantic partner of mine came back into my life. And at the time, he was all set. He was like, I want the baby, because my son was born at that time and I was available. He's like, I want both of you. And he was Mormon. And he's like, now let's go to the temple and get married and sealed. And I was like, let's go.
Oh my gosh.
Hold. So I go to the bishop and I'm like, the dreams have come true. I have another suitor and we've known each other for years. He wants the baby, all of it. And he is like, well, hermana Vela, which is Sister Vela in Spanish. He was like, you can get married to him, from the law of the land, you can get married to him, but you may not seal yourself in the temple to him. And I was like, wait, what?
Seal yourself?
So I gotta say, yeah, go ahead.
Mormonism is like that, though. Like, that is what happens to everyone. Is it's like you keep going along, you're doing all the things you're supposed to do, and it's almost like somebody pushes you and trips you over. Because it was a bishop who sent you down that path, and then was like, "Oh wait, that's not going to work." That is the most Mormon thing. I just want to put that up.
So a man in this life, when you're alive, right? Immortality, a man can get married to a woman, right? But if he dies, well, I don't want to flip off your phone. But if he dies and this woman is a widow, right? He's theoretically, legitimately still her husband.
Yeah.
So she cannot be remarried. She has to stay sealed to this person for her entire mortality and into the eternities. She may not have anybody else but him. However, if she dies, well, because if I'm supposed to be devoted to a dead husband, but also get remarried, but not resealed, so you're telling me I'm using somebody for the rest of my mortality, and then the love that I built and possible family with this guy doesn't carry through in the afterlife. I'm going back to Israel. Is that right? And then he was like, yep. And I was like, wait a minute. So if I go to this other man who stepped into my life and I explain this to him, he's going to be okay with that? Now you're telling me that if I wanted to spiritually, eternally divorce Israel, I have to write a letter, get it approved by you, and then it needs to be sent to the prophet. And he needs to permit the temple divorce with Israel in order for me to then reseal myself for all eternity with this new guy. Otherwise, this is a mortal thing that has an expiration date. And and it gets worse, because apparently if I were to have kids with mortal husband only, number 2, all of those kids, because I'm directly connected to Israel's lineage spiritually, all of these kids get adopted by Israel and his lineage.
Oh my goodness.
Yep.
Yeah, it gets real messy real quick. So
yeah. Wow.
I was like, yeah, this isn't for me. No, I'm gonna say no. If a woman can't get resealed to as many freaking men as he wants, or men as she wants, but a man can, that's spiritual polygamy. And so that was my catalyst. I had to go. And then I started learning over the last couple of years through social media.
Kind of explain both of y'all's backgrounds.
He went on a mission like all young men in that church are expected to do. And he got back home and got right on finding someone to marry like young men are expected to do. And I started going to the singles ward early because I was starting to go, like, not wanting to go to church because but people were mean. Students could be mean. And my brother was like, no, you have to keep coming to church. So he brought me. And so I was actually not graduated from high school when I started going to the singles ward, which is the whole point of the singles ward, is for people to find each other and get married, because that's like one of the most important things in Mormonism is people getting married and then having kids.
And having lots and lots of babies.
Yeah, and that principle is important. We shouldn't forget that principle of why, because, and it's ironic, Jillyn, like,
I mean, you guys are only 1.7% of the population. So of course you got to populate.
Kingdom. We got to grow the kingdom. And that was Joseph Smith's little sly header about polygamy, was like, but it's the Abrahamic covenant. That's what Abraham did. He had all the wives to then thus populate God's kingdom on earth. So that was his pitch to get away with it within his community.
Oh yeah.
It got more intense on an intimate level, if you know what I mean. But like,
right,
that was the pitch to the men. Men, go out and grab as many wives as you can. Get them all. Yeah. Brigham Young was just as bad.
We knew each other a full year before we got married. And for some people, that's actually slow in Mormonism. But we knew each other and we're kind of like friends. And then we started dating in March of the following, like he got home in October and he started dating like March of the following year, March, April. And then we felt like, you know, we should have that define the relationship. And only Mormons can. Like, other people would just be like, should we move in together? Should we be dating? Whatever. But in Mormonism, define the relationship is, when are we getting married? And I was like, I am 19. This is freaking me out. But then, as is always the case for me in Mormonism, I talked myself out of it. That's what you do in Mormonism.
Turn it off.
Have a testimony like a light switch. Yeah, exactly.
It kind of reminds me of the way gypsies live in their lifestyles. It's kind of similar.
I don't know about that.
You've ever seen those TV shows about the gypsies? Oh, it's crazy.
Yeah.
The parties they have to find their soulmate and all this stuff.
Yeah. So we started dating in April. My family tried to talk me into getting married before my brother went on his mission. So that would have meant we'd only been dating for a few months and then get married, which is not that uncommon in Mormonism. But I was like, whoa. And so I was able to hold everybody off until like September. And then we got married, and we're actually about to have our 20th wedding anniversary.
Woot woot.
Crazy. We're about to have our 20th wedding anniversary this September because Mormonism.
Wow.
Oh, he was my home
Biology.
teacher. Do you want to tell him? So is that he was my home teacher in the singles ward. I forgot to mention that part.
Oh,
People
oh
are
my
assigned
gosh.
to be home or visiting teacher. We use those terms, but they're basically looking out for the welfare of other people in the congregation. And as one guy friend said, he just cared more about your welfare, and we, But yeah,
It's
a lot of it has
ridiculous.
to do with women are supposed to be there to uplift men, support, not be too loud or too much of the leader or too much of trying to take control or whatever. And men, largely because they are the only ones who are given offices in the priesthood, which is different from the word priesthood in like say Catholicism. It just means power from God that they have been given by
Authority from
somebody.
God.
Watched.
Oh my
Silence.
God.
Silence. You're more
What
heavily silenced.
is it called? The family of proclamation?
Mhm.
Well, what
And
about work in the household? Are you expected to be a housewife and take care of children? Like, what is that like?
I
I
often
feel
am.
like I feel like it's evolved
Okay.
throughout the decades because I would say yesteryear, absolutely. It was you are the nurturer to your children and to your husband. You are the homemaker and XYZ for what a homemaker does.
Oh
And
yeah.
that's your role. That is
Oh yeah.
your life role. It is not college. It is not a career. That's your role.
And that's not the
And
only religion that is trying to pull away from that. But
Oh yeah.
right.
I just wanted to hear what
But
is expected and honestly the different kinds of Mormonism because there are like Mormon light, and there's the really
is there
staunch cult. Like, I mean, I've got tons of
Oh
Mormon
yeah.
friends that live a
Mormon life?
normal
That's great.
life and they've got 4 kids and they
You
live
only
wherever they
think
want.
they live a more like a normal life.
Oh,
Like
Yeah.
ooh,
there's
It's
okay.
like huge psychological trauma that you don't even necessarily realize is going on until you
yeah.
leave. So
Okay.
like
Yeah.
I was interacting with a wide variety of people and I was saying mostly the right things to be interacting with a wide variety of people and
Saying
I
most of the right things.
but and my husband never made me be like the stay-at-home person and the not go do things and he did support me in pursuing secondary education and
Yep.
various things I've done. So I don't want to
So
throw him under the bus. I think there's this push-pull in Mormonism where there's some amount of like, sure, get secondary education, sure, pursue whatever you think you should pursue or whatever. And there's a lot of shaming and pressure to
mhm.
be the homemaker, to be
Yeah.
like one woman gave a very tearful talk in that big meeting I was talking about like this woman thought it was okay to have coffee on her stove and that ruined her children's lives. And is
Oh
it
man.
really worth it? And there's a lot of that. And so like I have pursued some other things, but I do tend to come back to being stay-at-home mom, be with my kids, mostly because of their needs and personalities, and perhaps mine as well. But I think there's that pressure on all of I
Well,
would say on the
first of all,
majority
there's
of them.
nothing wrong with being a stay-at-home mom. It is a full-time job, and I respect the hell out of it. So continue.
Yeah.
But I
Agreed.
think it's one thing when it's a choice, and it's another thing when it's a multi-generational trauma.
When it's
Correct.
a programming.
And so, like, my
Yeah.
mom, when I first got married and I was 19, and my mom's like, why aren't you having kids? And I was like, I'm not ready. And I realized I had some big trauma to heal from. And I was like, not ready. And then my mom started attacking my husband and being like, she wanted to have kids before you. And he's like, I wanted kids out of the gate. She didn't want. So I think there's a multi-generational trauma that a lot of people think they're living their own life in Mormonism, but
Hmm.
it's the story has been going on,
And
for so long behind them.
mine's different. So my husband and I only got a year and a half of marriage before he passed. But within the first year, he was he was abnormal when it came to Mormon men because generally they're like, must have babies, must produce. And the women are kind of in that same mindset, especially when they finish a mission because they're like on mental steroids of like eternal families must have one. So I did. I got home from my mission, got married. Gosh, I got home in July. I was married that following January. Within the first year, I had, and this just goes to show you the lack of education of psychology within Mormonism as well. and how hardcore the brainwashing can be. So within the first year, I was like, Mormon, insert Mormon woman leadership voice. I just feel that in my bosom, the Spirit of God is talking to me, and it is time for me to not take birth control, and it is time for us to start a family. Like,
Oh, yes.
it was
geez.
that. So that's within my first year. I had the Holy Ghost sentiment hit my body. I could have been having a hormonal influx for the month. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
who knows? But my programming meant, like, psychologically said, oh, I feel that God's talking to me and I should no longer take birth control, which, by the way, was the only thing keeping my sanity and my hormone levels appropriate. So I stopped taking birth control, and then however many months it was until we were able to surprisingly conceive. Because I, similarly, Katie Rose, I was told I wasn't going to be able to conceive anyway. So it wasn't a big, huge leap of faith for me, really. And then Jacob was conceived. I wanted to finish schooling. I gave up schooling for my mission, then gave it up again to get married, and then gave it up again to start a family. I put all of my personal stuff aside, my whole career as an actress at the time, my whole ambition within school aside, for what I thought, due to programming, was a sentiment from God to start a family randomly.
Who's telling you this? That obviously you're completely capable of having children. So
it was a Canadian doctor. We'll leave it at that.
Oh, yay, Canada. No, their medical system's a little whack up there. Oh, well, that's ridiculous.
I had literally a medical doctor in Canada tell me the heartbreaking news that conceiving would be next to nilch without medical intervention.
I know, but based on what? So I mean, you don't have to talk about it.
No, it's totally fine. Just in brief, when I started my mission, my period did not return for 9 months. If that tells you the amount of stress that I underwent for my mission, it did not. I had zero period for 9 months. And so
so the doctor thought it's gone. You went through really early menopause.
Right. Well, that's what they were assuming. And then they were like, oh, you just have really intense polycystic ovary syndrome. And then I was like, oh, okay. And then they just went through all these different things, and they just settled on, don't expect to get pregnant. And I was like, ugh. And to a Mormon, Katie Rose,
so positive,
telling a female, let alone a female Mormon, let alone a female Mormon missionary, that she can't have kids was earth-shattering.
I mean, no doctor should ever use words like that. I mean, even my actual fertility doctor is like, he doesn't even want to use the word infertile around his patients. He calls it subfertility, technically, because it's still unexplained. And maybe I'll still get pregnant. Who knows? You know, but because it's unknown, these doctors need to be better at, explaining that, rather than, making you walk out of a room feeling completely hopeless.
Yeah. I met Israel Vela at my very first area that I served. And he was this amazing person. There was an instant spiritual connection. So we had a brother-sister like relationship for the entire 18 months of my mission. Because while you're on a mission, you can't have romantic anything at all. You're supposed to be piously minded. Like, it's basically
so you needed to keep that focus, and not like and know why you're there. Now, what is your age difference?
9 years. I was 21, so just add 9 to that. So he's about 30. And we were both Virgos. I don't know if that's relevant, but I finished in July. But prior to finishing, I felt a really sincere connection to him. And so much that I went home, started courting somebody else, but I still felt I needed to go back and investigate these feelings with Israel. And sure enough, when I did travel back up to surprise him for his birthday, July, August, September, 2.5 months later, by October 4th, we were engaged.
Oh, wow.
So by October 4th,
when you know, you know.
When you know, you know. By October 4th to January 24th, we were married in Mexico. And that's just because of visa fiasco. So January 24th, fast forward a year and a half, we're in the summertime of 2016. The majority of our marriage was actually in Mexico. And then we finally got our visa for both of us to move back to the United States for him, because he's native from Mexico. And then from there, it was a surprise. After moving all of our stuff from one country to the other, we found out that I was pregnant, which was a huge surprise, unexpected. I guess it just took me knowing that I was coming back home to the United States for my body to kind of settle into a happy place. So I don't know. As you said, it's unknown. So then everything shifted. We were extremely happy, also super stressed because we had nothing. We had just come back to the United States. We had what was in our bank account, and I had never finished school. So I was starting at the bottom of the barrel, and he was brand new to the country, starting at the bottom of the barrel.
Yeah.
And we're pregnant. So, and then unfortunately, right as he gets a great new job and I get back into school, he passes. He passed due to a drowning incident by himself in the in-ground pool. What I assume is that my late husband got cocky and jumped and dove, because whenever I was a kid and I did that stupidly and hit the bottom of a pool and the wall, I got the same gash on my nose.
Sure. Or people become paralyzed. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Knocked out, all sorts of things can happen. Yeah. And the best ways, what we can hope that he was knocked unconscious and it was a very sleepy, peaceful thing.
Yeah.
And then it picks up with the rest of my story.
So now that he is gone and you've kind of moved on from this religion, how do you feel about, knowing that he's, might have this, afterlife and the way he believed in everything compared to how you believe everything today? And actually, do you have a new religion, or are you more?
No, I'm just
Are you agnostic? Okay, gotcha.
And I'm a que sera person.
And Jillian, are you with a new religion, or are you more agnostic, or how have you?
I think I went from a faith that believed in having all the answers to just being less concerned about what those are.
Yeah.
And so I don't have a replacement at this point. I think I just see life as being really precious, whereas Mormonism's very focused on forever, which has got to make the processing of what you went through very hard.
Yeah, so that meet that I put a pin in, it was like and my present partner Scott can validate that I still have breakdowns, worrying. It's so weird because I don't believe in that religion anymore. I don't follow that religion anymore. And I actually have a lot of unrest, hatred, and anger, and everything that a victim of trauma or PTSD.
Oh yeah.
It's almost like a mental rape.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that sensation, spiritual rape in some cases, I still sit in a place of like, what would I feel if I ever saw Israel again in the next life? Because like I mentioned before, I'm such a one-to-one person when it comes to like true love, if you will, because I really, really, really did. And so it's trying to figure out, did I betray him? Was this something that he would have preferred? But removing or going back into that mindset that I had back 3 years ago. Oh my God, Katie Rose. When I first learned about the spiritual polygamy, and I was like, but wait, that doesn't serve me anymore. But wait, Israel's dead. And like, oh my God, what if I move on? And he's still like that juxtaposition of like, but I loved this person with or without the religion.
Well, I believe we can
religion, you know what I mean?
Love more than one person. And I don't
Absolutely.
believe we have the capability of understanding what is to happen to us. We are not intelligent enough, and I don't think we are meant to know. And I think that when he passed, he was taken care of regardless of what he, grew up believing or anything. And I believe that we'll be taken care of through energy. I believe it through, spirituality. And, some people believe in reincarnation. I do want to touch on the Mormon religion, though, about secret rituals and ordinances in the Mormon church. And, well, I know that they take solemn oaths to, like, never reveal anything about rituals. And
I'm going to take off my jacket for this one.
They speak about
talk.
Well, they speak about endowment or signs and tokens,
Oh yeah.
like required to pass through the veil into
Oh yeah.
heaven and the laws of obedience. So I just want to hear more about that.
So the way it works is that you don't go to the temple until you're ready to make a commitment. Either you're going on a mission, which would be you would have gone before you went on your mission, you would have gone to the temple and received your endowments, which is the words they use for you go through and do the particular rituals. And then you are always supposed to be committed from that point. Like
Yeah,
you're not
this is
allowed to know
generally
anything.
18 and 19.
Uh-huh.
Generally
You're
18 and 19-year-olds now. Sorry. Just gonna throw that out
although
there.
I guess were you how old were you?
So I was the last of the 21-year-old females.
I was 19. Like, who is ready to make an
Jeez.
eternal commitment to something that they're not allowed to ask questions about? So I actually read as much as I possibly could so that I could be as informed as I possibly could, but only from approved church sources, and those aren't helpful at all. And
Nope.
then otherwise, you would go in and you don't know what you're really doing. Everything's talked about very vaguely. This is supposed to be like Adam and Eve, or this is supposed to be like um, you know, the ancient Levites or something, but it's all very vague. And supposedly after the ceremony that you make of your own free will and choice, that line's in there, you aren't allowed to ever leave after that. Like
Yep.
you will be equivalently damned if you
You
ever
get
abandon it.
you get one out in front of everybody, one opportunity of an out in
With
front of the
all your
whole
family
populace.
there.
Then if you commit after this out, they issue a threat. There's a threat in the
There's an
no,
over
it's literally the devil himself is threatening you.
Lucifer
So
coming
the
at
way
you.
it works on your first time is you go and they check your paperwork that you met with your bishop and the next leader above him that they said, yes, you are quote unquote worthy to go. Worthy to go means like you're not having any kind of sexual relations, something you're not married to, you're not drinking alcohol or coffee or smoking or doing drugs, you're not doing any number of other things that they say are important. And then, yes, you are good enough to go. What?
Paying a full
Yes,
tithing.
10% of all of your increase. Yep. And I mean like your paycheck increase, not like you bought a new bed. And then you go and you have your paperwork and you have special clothing that you've never worn before and a white
That
dress
you
that
bought.
we can rent stuff or you can bring your own, but you have first they do washing and anointing. You go into this room and they pronounce blessings on you and they give you a garment to wear, and that's when you start wearing the special underwear. And then
Wait, Jillyn, you have to tell them what you're wearing during initiatories. You're actually wearing like this basically white burlap zip up sack
true.
with sleeves.
And
with sleeves.
when I went through,
Waddling
you
around.
had nothing on underneath they called it a shield. It was basically a poncho. You had nothing else on.
Yeah.
And it was often a private room. You had nothing else on. It was only women with you. Yeah.
So cringy. It's so cringy.
And they'll like touch different parts of you and bless you with certain things, like that your lips may never speak guile, and that your loins may be fruitful, and so forth.
God, because
And you
that's the
pronounce
most
a
important
blessing,
thing.
right? And then they give you the garment. You're supposed to wear it throughout the rest of your life. You're only supposed to take it off for like say swimming or
all the S's.
practical things. You can't
shower, sex, and swimming.
Right. And like I've known people who were dancers, like ballet dancers, and they would like not wear it while they were performing.
Right.
Or like Donnie Osmond.
Yep.
He took it off when he was performing on Broadway, like playing. So I mean, there are practicalities of when people won't, but generally you're always supposed to be wearing it, which is part of why I would not have been wearing a halter top like this.
I mean,
in my adult life.
The only thing that I can come close to that is in the Catholic Church when I had to go to confession. I remember I was like, Mom, what do I say when I go in the box with the priest? And she's like, just tell him you fought with your brothers and sisters. I'm like, but I didn't. And then I felt so I have to lie.
Yeah, it's the same.
Confess something. What if I have nothing to confess?
Somebody feeding you what to say is the principle of this whole temple experience.
Oh,
Carry on, Jillyn.
Yeah. So there is a script that you were supposed to memorize when you have been. It's just a volunteer thing that you will do these like blessings and rituals. They're only those who have been trained and assigned and given a set apart. They do the laying on of hands, is what they call it. But it's like a blessing on somebody's head, and then they get to do this. And I did become one of those people after I got married. And so we had to learn all the words. You were never supposed to speak the words outside. You weren't even supposed to be trying to memorize the words outside of the temple.
Huh.
And then after, so this is on your first time going through, you have, the initiatories, the washing and anointing is what they call those. It's basically various blessings. With one, now it's less invasive. Now it's just like they put their hands on your head and say a blessing. But once upon a time, it was a lot more. And when I did it, it was a lot more. And then you go through and you watch a movie. And at different points in the movie, they'll pause it and you put on, you're wearing white clothes, and then you'll put extra things on top of it that are similar to Masons in that it's got like a sash and it's got an apron. But over time, they've tried to make it look a little different from Masons so they can pretend they didn't totally steal it, but totally stole it. And 100%. You promise to never reveal the signs and tokens, but there's a great picture circling on the internet of a leader from our church shaking hands
like
with the
literally
president.
Signs and tokens, like literal.
They call them that
with your hands.
Signs and tokens is like special handshakes or special things that you do with your hands during the ritual, and then they'll do a special. Everybody gets in a circle around this altar they have in there. You can look up pictures online.
I have witnessed the handshakes with very wealthy people for the Freemasons. I've witnessed that.
Yep. And they describe it differently in there, like it's the sure sign of the nail versus whatever they call it in Masonry, but or like it's supposed to be symbolic of Christ. Right. And then you do a prayer, and then everybody repeats the words of the prayer together in the circle that they've made.
If I can interject here.
Yes. So sorry, I'm making it sound boring. It's so weird. I should make it sound more fun.
Like just look up the Mormon temple ceremony. Yeah. Whenever I went through the initiatories, which is the blessings and shit, when I went into my burlap poncho,
it's white.
It's not brown.
Everything's
white. But the weirdest thing was the horn with the water, the decorating with the water and the horn. I was like, why the hell is there an ox horn in here?
Why are you naked?
That was weird.
Underneath.
It's symbolic, Kate Rose. That's what they always tell you. It's supposed to be symbolic. Like you are. It's the symbolism, to my assumption. Correct me if I'm wrong, Jillyn, is you're like a baby.
You're supposed to be like Adam and Eve.
Your intelligence is like that of a child. You're naked. Little babies love being naked. Doesn't matter who they're around. Mm-hmm. That level of intelligence. Well, then when you move over into the next level, into your ordinances, and you're gaining all of these covenants, aka eternal promises of an exchange with God. God gives you authority, you give him your obedience. And you're wearing your garments. That's supposed to be like your fucking armory. The garments, the underwear is the internal way of showing your outer dedication. So like nuns wear everything on the outside, so on and so forth. The Mormons wear underwear, the same sentiment as underwear. That's their declaration of their status, their spiritual status, if you will. The third,
how are you wearing your garment?
The third increase is the sealing whenever you get married. That's like the next tier up, that spiritual marital sealing.
That qualifies you for the highest degree of heaven, because just like an MLM, Mormonism believes in different degrees of heaven. Reason why you're naked is because you're supposed to be following a journey that is thematically supposed to be similar to Adam and Eve. So first they don't have clothes, then Jesus makes them clothes because God tells them to, is how Mormons interpret the scripture. And then you the ceremony, your video you're watching is thematically supposed to be Adam and Eve, and they break the fourth wall and will occasionally talk directly to the audience. And then you're supposed to be taught like what you'll have to do at the veil, which is just a curtain, so that you can get to enter the highest degree of heaven. And you go first for yourself, and then after that you go through for dead people, because that's Jillyn, the only way everyone will be saved. Sorry.
Whenever you were a worker, right?
Yeah.
Why do you know why the women had to cover up their fucking faces with a veil so much? So the men just have hats, right? But the women have these veils. They have these cute little like pioneer looking veils, and then half of the back will flip over onto your face. So your face is covered.
I mean, we do that in regular, but they're like see-through veils. I mean, it's just,
Yeah, it's the
yeah.
same.
I
But
okay.
it
I
happens
don't.
to where like the men can see, but the women are not allowed to
But
show their
is that
faces.
only during a wedding ceremony?
It's all well, that's during the endowment. So that's like the second tier.
There's a
Yeah,
Not
part
like,
during
where
those. So,
there's stuff over like the PA that will tell you what to do next, which is as weird as it sounds, but at the time I thought it was fine. And they'll say the
the
women will now
sisters
please
will cover.
veil their
Uh-huh.
faith. Yep.
The sisters will
And
now cover their faces.
I
oh
read that once upon
goodness.
a time, the reason for the veils in the like I think like 1600s, part of why they believed in that was the idea of a symbol of purity. And my best guess is that it's supposed to be similar because in the endowment ceremony for each of them, for men and women, when they go through the initiatories, they don't use the same words. So for the men, they say that they may become clean, but for the women, we pronounce them clean. That was and this is the only time that women will ever do a quote unquote priesthood ordinance or ritual.
Right.
So when I
Hmm.
would get to like lay my hand on their head and like give the blessings, the only time as a woman that I would ever do that in my whole time.
Missionaries, sister missionaries get some authority too. I
Mm.
actually back this May started watching Under the Banner of Heaven on Hulu. And I learned a whole lot of new things from that one. And I'm still learning. I haven't done a lot of the book in the nose or TikTok, ex Mormon TikTok stuff, because of the programming, which is don't research outside of the church, right? So I didn't for
Hmm.
years because I was still scared of it. Yeah, and allegedly there's like a prophet only space in the temple
True.
too.
Well, I've seen the inside of the Mormon temple here because it's beautiful in Windermere. And I remember walking in and I like almost laughed out loud because when I walked in, I was greeted. First of all, everything was like white marble and gold
Mm-hmm.
everywhere. And then you're greeted with
Mm-hmm.
these people dressed in white. And I was like, did I just walk into heaven? I was like, what is happening here? Like it was,
That's probably what it's supposed to feel like.
oh my God, it felt like that. And then I almost started laughing. I was like, oh my God, am I like in an episode of The Office? Is somebody punking me? I was like, oh my God, this is crazy. And like
That
and they
defines
wouldn't,
Mormonism well.
well,
Yeah.
they wouldn't let me see the place because you have to be a member.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
I was
very
Like
like,
exclusive.
I
like
know.
Costco.
Oh yeah, I
Exactly.
like Sam's Club. But I'm just so curious, like what are the because we know what the bad things have happened in touchy Catholicism, but what are some things that have come to light about Mormonism that are really
Bad.
taboo? And yeah.
I've
You
been
got a
posting
gun.
about this on Facebook. Well, okay, so like I said, abuse happened in my family. Abuse in my family goes way back. And they aren't good at handling things in the church. It's much more important to worry about optics. And whether it's a microcosm like one family or whether it's something bigger, they're just not they're not great about safety. Like there was a time when I was a leader with little girls and I was all alone at the church building with them. And obviously I didn't do anything, but that was a
Hmm.
horrible safety issue for all involved. So they're very, very bad about safety. They think if you watch one little digital slideshow that you are ready to be there with kids, they don't do any kind of background check. I've walked into a congregation and been like first day, been like, hey, I can help in the nursery or primary because that's a little kids area because I'm used to it. I'm a mom, right? But like they don't know anything about me. Like there's literally no thought really given to safety. And considering the fact that they have such an incredible amount of money, fun fact, they are the largest private landowner in the state of Florida. Even though they do not have a particularly large LDS presence, they buy up a lot of property as tax free as part of their
Hmm.
they have all the money from people giving 10% of their income. So they do something with it, and that's buying
Another
property.
another thing about that big old money sign that the church has, the Mormon church, is that they love lawyers. So
Oh,
very
yeah.
similar to Scientologists. They have
Yeah.
a big chunk of tithing funds the lawyers of the church.
Hmm.
And the lawyers are basically the best cover-up artists they can pay.
I
Hmm.
digress so far from what I was supposed to say. Thanks for getting us back on. But yeah, so church leaders are supposed to call a helpline that is supposedly supposed to when there's abuse. And it's supposed to direct them towards social workers, but what it'll actually direct them towards is lawyers. And once somebody's talking to a lawyer, the church can claim that it is client attorney privilege and they never need to tell anyone about it.
Yep.
And And it's
Whoa,
not
that is
even
like
that the person chose to talk to a lawyer, and they shred the documents. When they
Yeah.
have a church court where they'll talk to somebody who was, say, abusing children and decide to, say, excommunicate them, they shred the documents.
this is not their
And
first rodeo. This
and
is
a
the biggest
mandatory
loophole.
reporter can't
Yeah.
even be at one of those meetings because they don't want them to have to be a mandatory reporter. In the
Yeah.
case of the one that's been getting a lot of attention from Arizona, the man's not even still alive, and they're still trying to, quote unquote, protect his privacy, even though it's his own children saying, hey, why didn't whatever you knew about us, why didn't you do something?
Now,
And
before you move forward with that, to the people who do not know
yeah,
about this story, could you give a little synopsis?
I can. This man admitted that he had been molesting his own daughter in Arizona,
Oh,
and
okay.
the bishop was their physician. But because he had on his clergy hat, he supposedly did not have to do anything about it when he was told.
Correct.
And they didn't do anything to stop it. And when that person moved out of that clergy position, because remember, it's just a volunteer thing, then he told the next person who also did nothing about it. The most they did was tell him, you should report yourself, which of course he didn't. And they told the mom, you should do something, which of course she did not. And when he was finally arrested, because one of the videos he took of abusing their children, which he went on to abuse more than one, went online, he got caught. And he was border enforcement, and so he got held accountable. And I think he took his life while he was in prison. The children are suing, and their current guardians, because the mom went to jail as well, are suing the church over the fact that they did nothing to stop this, to stop child rape that they were aware of. And the church is saying that this is just a money grab and that they should not have to do anything because as clergy they couldn't, which isn't even doctrine. But that's what they're trying to claim. In Catholicism, the difference is that if a priest is told something as a priest, that they're not allowed to tell anyone, even unto death. But Mormonism just tries to ride the coattails of that. But like, I know lots of bishops who have told everybody about what they were told as bishop. And so there's no justification for this whatsoever to claim that there's any kind of privacy. And in the Boy Scouts of America settlement, the church tried to say that they would donate money to that settlement if they got blanket immunity for ever being held accountable for any kind of crimes like this again, which fortunately a judge said no. But the truth is that there was a bunch of sealed documents that came forward, and then there's the fact that they shred a lot of documents. I say that when a sexual predator, which is what Joseph Smith was, and if you talked to me a few years ago, I would have said he's the most amazing.
Oh, geez.
But I know better now. Starts a religion, it's kind of unsurprising that it will have a problem with this to this day.
Wow. The Joseph Smith that you speak of, the angel Moroni and the golden tablets and the magic rocks and the glasses, what's that all about?
Moroni. That's the restoration message. I will not give you the Mormon shit that they tell you to spiel. But it's because you're also not taught. You're not taught that. You're not taught that Joseph Smith put his fucking face in a hat. You're not taught that he used a stone. You're not taught that he had all of these elements and, knickknacks that he proclaimed that were these divine, tools and utensils to thus receive a revelation and translate something. It's all hogwash. It's insane that the actual history of learning about, treasure hunting, that Joseph Smith was a treasure hunter. His family was extremely poor. It was a con mastery thing in order to persuade people to pay him to take them on a treasure hunt. And nobody ever found anything, but, so it all started very young for Joseph Smith.
Joseph claimed that an angel came to him and told him that no churches were the right ones to join. The truth is that he actually had multiple versions of the story, and all of us within the church, all of us within it are supposed to not ever question it when you're in. And once you leave, you learn there were all kinds of problems. That his mom said in her memoir that he was always telling these stories of Native Americans and fantastical tales and regaling the family long before he ever claimed to have found these golden plates or have been led to them by the angel Moroni. And he claimed before he he ever claimed to have, been called God for all this, he actually got in trouble with the law because people would pay him to find treasure, and then he'd be like, oh, we were almost there, and then it slipped away from us because there were these devils in the ground taking it away. Or he would say, I have these stones that I found like on a walk, and these stones they're seer stones. They make it so that I can see things. And he would be paid, so he's a con man, he would be paid to find fortune. And he would use so he actually, something I only learned about in the last like maybe 6 months was that there's records of him having been arrested because he had been conning people. They've been paying him
it's
to
so
use
obvious
these stones
to the outsiders, but when you're so in it and you're so manipulative and you really just start believing in these prophecies and these things,
we sing praise to the man.
Now, were you guys allowed to drink soda?
Did I just get an earworm in your head? I'm sorry.
It doesn't make sense, Katie Rose. It doesn't make sense. So we're not allowed to drink coffee because it's a hot beverage and it has high caffeine. And we're not allowed to drink alcohol because it makes us dumb, or whatever the fuck he wanted to say about that. But then when it comes to soda, we've been taught the caffeine rule about tea and coffee. But I'm sorry, an energy drink and soda is okay when they can quadruple the caffeine amount. So there's a lot of Mormons that were like, we don't drink soda. So it got very confusing there over the last few decades, because some people are like, oh, Mormons can't drink soda, but we can. And then after you remove yourself from the freaking Gomorrah of Mormonism, you understand that the fucking church has stocks in Coca-Cola and Pepsi. So they literally cannot tell their members not to drink soda, because then they would doing themselves a disservice for their stock investment. So that's why you see Mormons drinking soda.
They wouldn't sell caffeinated beverages on BYU campus for a very long time, though. So it definitely had like a cultural, like not official, but sort of cultural connotation of being bad. And now there are these stores in Utah where you can get a soda with all the stuff that people put on coffee, because that sounds healthy.
Oh, yeah, so good.
So healthy.
Jesus is supposed to visit the Americas after the crucifixion, after he was crucified, and there's no eternal hell. So is there no hell in the Mormon religion? I think
there is for us. Once you've made those special promises to God in the temple, I'm pretty sure outer darkness is all you get.
Yeah, and then you have sons of perdition. So there's outer darkness for us bitches, and then below us is sons of perdition. So that's like ex-prophets, like the worst of the worst of the worst, who have like no. So that's like the highest degree falling to the lowest degree, if that makes sense. So if you have like if they denied what they have visually, like God has granted them presence of himself, or the highest degree is falling to the lowest degree, that's your sons of perdition. Or let me see my hands. And then about here is where Jillyn and I would reside, in outer darkness, which is like, we're not necessarily prophet tiered, but just in that same era, that same space.
We were supposed to go to the celestial kingdom. We kept all the rules and we got married in the temple, but then we abandoned it.
Now,
I said, not for me.
In marriage rituals, in some cultures, some people wash their husband's feet. What are traditional Mormon rituals?
Mainly for me, it was a surprise that the husband is the one who invites you through the veil. I mean, that's really the only.
Mm-hmm.
You're supposed to tell him your special name. So
that's the thing.
It's when the time comes for him to call you forward in the next existence, he can say that special name. The special name is based on what day you went through. So there is a special name for each day of the month, and mine was Abigail. Sarah. This is very naughty to tell people, by the way.
My goodness. Now I know what your special name is.
Yep. And I was never allowed to know my husband's or any of the men's names.
I don't know Israel's.
Yep. Just by the way. And so we do a little, they call it a short veil. They usually do it right around the wedding, like the ceremony. And it's just you and him at this curtain, and you tell him the name, and then he pulls you through. And I at the time thought it was very sweet, and now of course I'm like, oh,
so romantic, so romantic in the moment
that he would take you through and then all your family that is also endowed. Anybody else has to wait outside. They're too young to be endowed because we don't do it to children.
Not
They're
members.
they're not members, whatever. They just have to wait outside. And then the people who have, they're worthy, which is totally decided by the church. But anyway, they're there, and you go in, and everybody's dressed in white. And if you are a bride that was going to wear your wedding dress, it has to be plain enough. Otherwise, you'll wear just one of the white dresses like people wear in the temple. And it has to, cover you. I know people that their dress didn't cover enough, so they had to have like fake sleeves on and this whole bit. And you wear the temple robes. I can send you a picture later. And then you kneel across the altar, take each other in the patriarchal grip, which is totally a Mason thing. Supposedly, the chandelier over the altar is, supposed to be Jesus. It's this light there. And they do this very short words of like, you are being sealed together. It's not personal. There's no vows. There's nothing romantic personal about it. They just use the exact same words, almost the exact same words they use for sealing dead people to other dead people. It's just that they don't say who is dead. They just say your name.
What do you mean,
and then
sealing dead people to other dead people? You mean
We do proxy work.
You mean a live
Proxy.
person going to a funeral?
No, this is proxy work, my love. This is 8-year-old.
We cannot get through all this in
No.
Oh no, go ahead.
In a lump sum, Mormons in the temple I think is it 8 or 12 you can start going to the temple to do baptisms for the dead.
11
is it 8 or 12?
now.
It's 11 now?
11 now.
Oh my gosh. What is a baptism for the dead? Please explain.
So Mormons in the temple, starting at the age of 11, can start doing ordinances, aka actions for the dead, basically taking a dead person's name who was not baptized, endowed, or married as a Mormon. So, for
converting
example,
them,
saving them,
and
converting them while they're dead and they don't know.
Yeah,
they can choose to accept it or not.
What a way to disrespect the dead. Oh my goodness.
Yes.
Wow.
But they have the agency. The belief of Mormons is that when I die, my flesh is dead, but I'm still alive spiritually. So if I still was like super against Mormonism, but my cousin over there baptized me, I can still say no thanks. So it's not basically mandating a spiritual like a person, but it is a Mormon basically giving them an opportunity for eternal salvation and making it to the high. So to a Mormon, it's like we have given you the straight and narrow path. We did the work for you to achieve absolute glory with Christ in the uppermost celestial glory. So to a Mormon, it's this beautiful, comforting, peaceful. I got to save my great grandmother who was Catholic. Now she can have the opportunity to find the true church, because
meanwhile she's been dead and she's like, I'm already in heaven, bitches. She's like, I already met God. So
we believe that marriage bonds are dissolved, as Camille was pointing out. So also that's the only way that people will get to be together forever. So I really think that in many ways Mormonism is almost like the mob. Like, that's a nice, my husband and I joke, that's a nice family you got there. It'd be a shame if something would have happened to it, like you not tithing, living righteously. And so I feel like most people who have had a loss, they're really like sucked in. If that one bishop hadn't tried to force you, you probably would have wanted to stay because you would want to have your eternal family. That is just drilled in you. When my husband and I left, we left shortly before our anniversary last year, and the bishop was like, but you were married in the temple, like you're throwing that away. And so it's very manipulative. And so the idea is that we are sealing the entire human family is getting linked together by a sealing individual family units. And then everybody is linked and we're saving everyone because
God's loving, but he's also selfish. And if you don't follow him in the Mormon way, outer darkness for you, kiddos.
Thank you guys for, doing this today. I want to wrap it up with a couple of just in your own words, personal things you guys have been through or how it's made you better. I know, Camille, I asked you to give me a quote and I thought it was beautiful. Your quote that you gave me was, she conquered her demons and wore her scars like wings. And that is by Atticus. And I think that's such a great way to kind of sum up in this awful situation what you went through and kind of have your own personal rebirth and say, this is a part of me, but it's not who I am.
Yeah.
and getting to tell your story and move forward. And I know you relate a lot to, these characters that you get to play, like Marilyn Monroe and these things.
Yeah.
And I just how I guess the way I want you to express to me what this has done for you, good and bad, as a person, and what you would want to tell other people who are considering leaving the Mormon church.
Yeah. That quote really helped my spine recover, because it really was leaving the Mormon church. When you Speaking for myself only, I was extremely pious, and so leaving something that was my 360 and then some, it was a culture shock, as an understatement, to the world. I had many people trying to convince me that it was the world's fault. This is what you get. This is what you deserve when you leave the church. Conquering those demons, it was a phoenix experience. It still is a phoenix experience. It's nothing that you're done
Love that.
in a day. You're not done in a month. You're not done in a year. I'm 5 years out now. I would say I'm most grateful because my son.
This is a different kind of coming out.
Yeah, I know.
You're
Speaking.
leaving.
Yeah, no, it's the absolute definition of coming out. It's departure. And my son is this beautiful soul, and Jillyn can I assume would have a very similar experience. My son is 5 years old, and back 2 years ago, he wanted to dress in Disney princess dresses. And had I been the pious Mormon mother, that is a worst nightmare. But now, having gone through what I went through, I get to follow my son's lead, and I get to support him
and let him discover his life.
Yes, and let him be his own director, his own entity, his own guide. Well, his own discoverer, of his own life. And I just kind of get to support and bumper for safety. And if it helps anybody else out there, my 3 things I run my life by is health, happiness, and stability. And health is 4 things: physical, spiritual, mental, emotional. If you're healthy, your happiness, that kind of goes tied with your stability. We don't want anybody to lose their life unnecessarily due to shame and guilt and all these things. And let me tell you, I had my run-in with that suicidal ideation. I had those moments because of how intense the transition was. It's a liberating thing. Remember that you have to crawl before you walk before you run. Same thing with flying with our brand new Phoenix wings. You got to learn how to fly a little bit before you soar.
Absolutely.
And those accidents will happen, but that makes you stronger. Just keep going.
I love that. Jillyn, you sent me another quote as well. And I can completely relate to this one, but if you don't see a clear path for what you want, sometimes you have to make it yourself. And if I'm not butchering this, is it Mindy Kaling?
Kaling, yeah.
Kaling, yeah. I love that. And that's just being true to yourself and not giving up, and being an independent and determined person to say, I'm going to be okay and I'm going to keep moving. And I know it can be tumultuous with families, and as you said, you've had to break away from that. But for your own mental health and your family's well-being, you made a tough choice. And I can relate to that on different levels as well.
It is worth it. When I first stopped talking to my parents, I had a day where I almost got hit by 2 different cars, like just walking in my neighborhood, and like one of them, the brakes went out. Like I wasn't doing anything wrong, like the brakes went out and everyone on the sidewalk.
Good
And
Lord, Jillyn.
I was just like, wow, life is too short to live this way anymore. And I think ultimately that might be also what it came down to last summer, when I realized I couldn't stay anymore, is that I felt like I'd had my Abraham moment. I felt like Mormonism was saying that I would have to sacrifice my child because of some quotes that came from church leadership. And I was like, I'm not doing that. That is hell. That is hell for me. I will choose hell tomorrow, even if I die tomorrow, even if the whole thing were true. I choose leaving because this is not okay, and this isn't worth it. And I think that was what it took for me. I've known people that like had to pray and pray, decide what to do. And I was like, that's just going to make me talk myself out of it. I've
Hmm.
Yep.
talked myself out of so many wrong things before in this church, whether it was Prop 8 or other horrible things they've done. I've always talked myself out of it. This time I was like, I don't even care. I can't do this again. And I can't risk losing my child. My child had come out to us like the same time that there had been a terrible church quote about LGBTQ people. And I was just like, I can't do this anymore. I don't even care.
Yeah.
I don't care what happens. And then it sounds terrifying because they make it terrifying. Like I was born and raised in the church. They make it sound terrifying to leave. They work really hard to make
Yeah.
it sound terrifying to leave. And somebody said to me online that I was talking with said, they make it seem like they're the guardrail at the edge of a cliff, but you find out that when you go over it by leaving the church, it's just a fence in the middle of a field and there's just more field.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Now, here's my question to both of you. Knowing that there are Mormons out there knocking on doors and ringing doorbells and doing their thing, how do you feel like it's now your mission to go up to Mormons and be like, you should leave, or do you just let it lie? Like, how do you feel when there's other people around you that are praising it and they're like, I love being a Mormon and blah, 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 blah. How do you feel
Mm.
about that? Do you feel like you need to say something, or is
This
it?
this will be interesting because Jillyn is way more public than I am.
Mhm.
So you'll have two different takes on this. So Jillyn, you can go first.
I do post about this on Facebook, but I'm not posting about it necessarily because I want to save people, but because I think that the Mormon church has thrived to the extent that it has, and we could debate how much it's actually thrived because of the inaccuracies, because of the lies, because they'll just change the doctrine to come up with whatever. And so I just
Yeah.
really want to push back on it because so many people have been the collateral damage. So many people have been hurt all the way back to Joseph. So I think a lot of my speaking up has to do with those who have been harmed, who maybe don't have a voice. But as far as trying to like save the missionary, who I read an article where they said being missionary is like a hazing. It's like a hazing experience that binds them, trauma bonds them to the
Yeah.
church. And so I feel bad when I see them, but like I won't allow them near my home because it upsets my kids. But there's a part of me as a mom that's like, oh, those poor things, especially here in Florida, wearing a full suit or whatever.
Mm.
Uh, and I don't feel like I can save anyone. I don't feel like that's within my power, but I definitely feel like they should not be allowed to control the narrative anymore.
But I do feel that you are so open about where you stand that if somebody, since you are open about it and people know where you are, they might feel comfortable coming to you. And then at that point,
Right.
you would be open to discussing it with them. So I think it's very important to be open because that means you're someone that's because they can't come to me. I'll be like, I don't know. I don't know how to help you. But you've been through it. So the more that you're open about it, the more people that would feel comfortable coming to you in their confusion or,
Yeah.
when they're making those decisions.
This is my first time being public really about it. So thank you, Katie.
No, no, that's
um,
it's not an easy thing to do. Like you said, it's very brave and it's not an easy thing to do, especially when you felt like it was such a big part of your identity.
yeah, it's
It's
for
not
me,
anymore.
it's no, it's not. And for me, it's definitely because I don't know, my personal experience with it is just so it feels like a caterpillar. It's inch by inch. So even though I've had a more lengthy time out of the church than Jillyn, which is kind of crazy to think about. I'm 5 years out. Jillyn's only what, 2, you said?
Not even. We haven't.
Not
I
even
think
two
we
years.
might be about a year.
Yeah. And we're both born and raised in the church. And so we
Mhm.
have these really different reactions of how we've left. And mine's extremely timid, and for whatever psychological reason that is in my brain. But it is important. That's why I agree to do it because I feel that sentiment very strongly that things shift, things change, just like the ocean. And then we need to be there to help others, you know,
Yeah.
whenever their tide turns. And I feel like if I were to see missionaries, I'm 100% agreeing it's a hazing. You can't talk to somebody in that state. I know me, what I was like as a missionary. There was no talking to me when I was in that state. It's picking and choosing your battle for sure,
Hmm.
Yeah.
for your safety and for your health and sanity. So pick and choose your battles wisely, I would say, and understand the more public you can be, the more of a beacon, Jillyn, the more of a beacon of light you can be to help others. That's a
Totally.
stab at the freaking Mormon temple, which is a beacon of light for others to come to for help.
I think in any religion, nobody likes to be preached to. I think it's just a stronger stance to have a voice. And if somebody wants to approach you, then you can explain to them why you made your
Right.
choices.
Right.
Because in the moment that somebody else were to come up to you and be like, oh, you're bad because you left Mormonism, that's when you can stand on your own 2 feet and come back with it. So rather than preaching, if you know where you stand and you can defend where you stand, I think that's more important moving forward than to just run around, wasting your time trying to convert people, away from it, basically.
Yeah.
But before we go, any personal website or Instagram that you'd like to plug for today, for yourself, for your business, this is the time to do it.
I do. I have several different things. First of all, I have a stage name. Her name is Mila, Milla Monroe. So I own a production company called Vela. That's a memorial commemoration to my late husband. My marital last name with him is Vela, which means candle in Spanish.
Beautiful.
Luz is Spanish for light. So translated, Candle Light Productions. So I dedicated my company to him, and I'm producing immersive theater. Right now, I'm producing the Haunted Road Experience here in Central Florida. I'm also co-producing The Witches Ball with Spooky Empire, who is sponsoring us. But feel free on any of my social media platforms. Never feel like you can't reach out to me personally for anything, especially concerning the topic we've covered today. So thank you.
Awesome. And do you have an Instagram tag that you want to share?
Yeah, it's Instagram, TikTok, all of the things. It's the same one, which is Mila_Monroe. I'm sorry, Miss MS_Mila_Monroe.
Got it.
Mila Monroe.
All right, Jillyn, do you have anything else that you'd like to go ahead and plug?
I keep a lower profile because of the dysfunctional family, because of the toxic things going on towards queer community children, because I have some. I would be really fine if Mormonism were to go away entirely, but saying that could easily bring the angriest factions of alt-right Mormonism down upon me. But if I would love for them to go away, I would love that. They have a lot of money. They get involved in a lot of politics. I don't think a lot of people realize that even if they don't know who Mormonism is definitely having an effect on just ordinary people's rights and access to them.
Yeah. Thank you guys so much for taking the time to do this. You both were a pleasure to talk to. I learned a lot today. This is always a safe space. This is a place that I want people to speak their truth. And I always say, if you don't like it, you don't have to listen to me. And I will surround myself with people that do not mind listening to the same things that I listen to, because as you said, life is too short. So surround yourself with people that you love, that you get along with, and enjoy your life.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, guys. Well, thank you guys so much. This has been Katie Rose, served straight up with a twist. And I'll talk to you guys next time.
Cheers, friends. Thank you, Katie Rose.
Cheers. Love you guys.